getting to our guest speaker, and we want to say welcome to Daphna Horowitz. Thanks for being here and joining us in our little circle.
Thank you.
I
Thanks
hope you enjoy it. She's the managing executive for PEAC Solutions, and I'm going to leave it to her, as we often do, you know, to introduce herself, however way she wishes to do that. But she's going to talk to us today about wholehearted leadership, which I found the wording quite, you know, intriguing. Welcome. Looking forward to the discussion with you.
Thank you, Prof. Can I ask a question? You probably haven't.
You can ask many questions.
Before, but is it possible to just move into the circle?
Yes, you can.
Like I'm missing.
Well, you can stand up and walk around.
I'm happy. Can we sit in the circle, all of us? And
no, we just sit here.
We just sit here?
Yeah.
I'm not allowed to...
No.
We're not allowed to make this
we want you to get used to the fact that you can't see everything.
Oh, now there's a brilliant metaphor.
Some of us are excluded.
Yeah, that's terrible. Feels
but
awful.
they can see you.
Turning my back. Can you hear me?
Yes,
here's to new experiences, right? Okay, so where do you want me to start? With introducing myself? Or?
Yep.
Okay. So to introduce myself, this feels very strange, I have to say, but I'll go with it. To introduce myself, I am a leadership coach, and I call myself a change catalyst. Okay, so we have to get used to change and new experiences. And my background has been completely different. I qualified as an actuary. And I worked as an actuary for many years. I worked in the academic environment as well, lectured, and in the corporate environment, and then decided to make this career change to coaching and leadership development. And my area of interest and specialty is really around creating the leaders of the future. And what does this really mean? Because leadership is such a big topic that is talked about so much, and I really wanted to go into it a little bit more and understand it more and be able to develop that aspect of leadership in the new generation and the existing generation of leaders. So for me, it's been a journey of leadership for myself and in working with others. And I'm just passionate about what I do. I've completed my master's, so I'm in awe of all of you sitting with this decision of, do I continue to a PhD? So really well done to all of you. And I've recently launched a book as well called Courage to Lead, and it's all about leadership. And that really introduces that, stem from our master's research as well, but introduces the concept of wholehearted leadership. And that's really what I want to talk about today. So I understand this to be a conversation, and I'd really like to bring everybody into the conversation around leadership. And sitting with such an academic group, I'm going to ask you a question that might seem a little odd. Okay, so there is no trick to this question. I have to say, not a trick question, but I really would love to hear your thoughts on, do you guys believe that the sun will rise tomorrow morning?
No.
And here the wheel go, right?
No, not
you
necessarily.
don't. Okay, cool, great. Anyone else?
Nope.
Another no. Do we have any yeses in the room? And I expected this. Thank you guys, help me out here. Right, how many yeses?
I would say it depends where you are.
Yeah, I know. How many yeses on this side of the room? How many, well, come on, you know what, I'm standing up. How many yeses? I want to see those hands. Yeses? Definite yeses I want.
What do you mean by belief?
Is the sun going to rise tomorrow? Forget about belief assumption. Is the sun going to rise tomorrow?
Are we going to do it?
Is it going to rise tomorrow? Not whether you know or not. Let's just see the definite yeses. Okay.
Yes.
Right. Thank
If
you.
it's not overcast.
How many no's? Quite a few no's. We're going to hear from you. And how many maybes? I'm not sure what you want from us. Okay, thank you. Let's hear from some no's. There were some no's here.
Well, why does the sun need to rise tomorrow? So, I mean, why do we ask, why does it need to rise tomorrow?
I'm just asking a question, is it or isn't it?
I don't think it needs to rise tomorrow.
Maybe it doesn't need to, but when you wake up tomorrow morning, in your bed, in your room, the same place you've been for the last 100 years, sorry, just teasing.
Just gave
This is my third iteration.
Your third, okay, so maybe more than 100 years now. But in the same room, same place, when you wake up tomorrow, will the sun come up or not?
No, it doesn't need to come up.
Okay, you're not answering the question.
Well, first
Will it be sunlight? Will it be light? Or will it continue to be dark? Because
It
of the
could
sun.
be dark tomorrow.
Could be. Okay, so you believe that it may actually be dark tomorrow?
Yes.
That you may wake up and have to
Yes.
live in darkness. Cool.
That you
Great.
may not even be alive.
You may, sorry?
That the solar system as it is doesn't need to exist as it is.
True, true. And the fact is, even if whether you're alive or not doesn't have any bearing on this question because it's independent, right?
the sun may rise, but I will not be able to see it, so I won't see the sun.
Okay, so I didn't ask, will you see it?
No, I won't. I might be blind. That's it.
But whether you're blind or not, will the sun rise?
No.
You're saying for you as a personal experience it might not rise, but I'm saying factually, big picture, will the sun rise? And you can ask other people to corroborate that information for you if you need to. Great, we've got some real challenges here. Who else
If you
said
do
no?
not see it, then it didn't rise.
Okay, this is my reward, okay, for opening a can of worms, right? Right, who else said no?
Well, you're using the wrong terminology, first of all. The sun doesn't rise. The sun stays there. It's just that you turn around. It's a question of...
I didn't even get to the R because of exactly
16 nights a day in the Arctic.
You're right, and I knew I was getting myself into trouble with this question. I just knew it. Okay, let's hear from the maybes. Who are the maybes? Yeah.
It's like breathing, it's living in the moment. It's not one of those things that I think of.
Okay, exactly. Thank you. Absolutely. I want to come back to that. Was there someone else? Yeah.
It depends on one, what we mean by the word believe. Okay? And if the sun rises, who has seen that it has risen? So you're talking about me being able to see it has risen or assuming it is going to rise.
Right.
So there's so many.
Nuances.
That's right.
Delicate
in
aspects and
exactly,
definitions.
in that person. So it might rise, it might not. Where am I?
Existential questions, right? Okay, great. So I knew I was speaking to a group of philosophers here, and that this would be something that would come up, but that's great. Because what we're doing is challenging beliefs. But I want to go to some of the yes. So over here, what was your yes? How do you know it will rise tomorrow?
I just know.
You just know. Thank you.
Because
Should
it
I
will
give you a
come
hug?
out tomorrow.
Thank you.
It has been rising all along anyway.
Exactly.
That's why I was struggling with my case study.
Tell me to
It's been there.
Thank you.
Get them with the yeses.
Yes.
I'm hopeful. I'm just hoping that it rises because I've made plans. You know, it's
Exactly.
like when you make plans with your friends or you're taking your car for a service, you don't know if it will go, but you're hoping that it does.
Exactly. And the truth is, even for all of you philosophers and existentialists and whatever you want to call yourselves, if the sun doesn't rise tomorrow, you guys are going to be in trouble. All of you, because your life will change in a way that you actually will not even know how to handle. Right? Am I right?
No.
Okay.
If the sun did not rise tomorrow,
Yeah.
this earth will
We
not
make a
be.
plan.
Yeah.
This earth will not
Yeah.
be.
Everything
So
will
you
everything will
wouldn't,
be
you will
turned
be in a
upside
different
down.
consciousness.
Yeah.
You'll be in a different part of the universe. So you wouldn't be here to notice that it didn't rise.
Yeah.
You'll be a different consciousness.
I agree.
So
I
that
agree.
is actually, I was actually wondering the correctness of the question.
What's the point of your question?
Whether this question is the question you asked, I was wondering whether it's just a question. Is it the correct question to ask? Whether the question, the sun is going to rise tomorrow? Because the implication of it not rising, because it hasn't even, since human consciousness, there hasn't been a day the sun did not rise.
Exactly.
You get the point? So we don't know what's going to happen if it didn't rise. And if it did not rise, this earth will not be on its axis again. It would have actually drifted into the other parallel universe, possibly. You get the point? So what is the basis of your question?
You want to know that? What is the purpose of my question? What is the point of my question? What am I really trying to say? So I actually want to say, there's two things I want to say. I want to share a story, which I'll do just now, about the sunrise. And I also want to illustrate how we can overcomplicate things. And I'm going to go with that first. So, here's the thing. When I talk about leadership, and I would like to have a discussion about leadership and what it means, but I'm just going to pose this to you because I know it's wonderful. I love to see the thinking that's happening and the vibrant conversation that's happening. But the truth is that leadership is something that we have taken to a level of complexity that if I had to ask you all what is leadership, I would get probably 100 different answers in the room. And yet, if I had to ask you, and this will be interesting to see what you guys come up with, if I had to ask you, is everybody in this room, does each of you believe that you're a leader?
Yeah.
I see some nods.
Not necessarily.
Just make it easy. Who believes he's not a leader?
Right. Who believes he's not a leader? Thank you, Mario.
Confirmed follower.
Who is not sure? Who is not sure? Who is not sure about that question?
I'm not sure.
Put up your hand. Okay, thank you. Who else? Anybody else not sure?
In some ways.
I know some of you are not sure.
No. In what context?
Yeah, okay. In what context? Okay. In what way? When you look at people around you, do you look at everyone that you interact with as a possible leader?
No, it's a natural leader.
As a possible
Because
leader?
new motivational speakers always tell us that everybody is a leader.
Yeah. Thank you, Mimo. Thank you for that beautiful box you put me. Love that. I'll take it. We love to tell you that it's true. And the question is, or the idea is, yes, that everybody is a leader, and that everybody is a leader in some area, in some context, and in some way. Yet, we do not actually behave that way. We do not behave that way for ourselves, and we do not behave that way when we interact with other people. And that's what I want to challenge. Because you can say, you motivational speakers, tell us that. And it's one thing to tell, but it's quite another to actually challenge thinking and actually say, what are you doing that actually makes you behave in that way? And how would the world be different, or how would your existence be different if you were to start behaving in that way? And that's the challenge that I want to bring to the table. And I want to relate it to what you said. I don't know what your name is. Charmaine, about an innate wisdom. You said there's an innate, what were your words exactly?
I was saying that it's like breathing, it's like living, it's in the moment, you're living, you don't even think about it.
Exactly.
Yeah. You know, not a conscious effort.
Exactly. There are some things that we're just not conscious of and that we just take for granted. And to me, that's actually part of the, call it innate or natural intelligence of the world. Because there are some things that are going to happen. And I'm going to tell you, yes, the sun is going to rise tomorrow, just by the way. And meaning that the light will come up, and yes, it's the rotation of the earth and all of that, but it will happen. And why is that? Because there is a natural intelligence and there is a natural order to how things happen. And that sometimes we lose sight of that, we don't become conscious of it, we don't believe in it, and we don't really look at, so where else is there this natural intelligence? So if I had to ask you, and we're talking about leadership, what would be the natural intelligence around leadership?
That's a complicated question.
There is no easy question. I mean, the sunrise question was a complicated question.
The last count I heard that there were about 12 types of intelligence.
Yeah, and that's one theory or framework. So you could look at, leadership could be based on those 12 different types of intelligences. Cool, that's one answer, thank you. What else?
Isn't it to lead for a purpose?
Yeah, absolutely, that there's some purpose to it. That you've got to lead to a purpose, lead for a purpose, or because of a purpose. For sure. What else?
Look, when you say natural intelligence and leadership,
Yeah.
look, you have to go back to quantum physics.
Okay.
Because that is where the law that governs nature begins. You know, if you go back to, there's something they call the elementary particles of nature. You know, these elementary particles of nature actually started from the time, actually that's what they did when they did the particle collision and the acceleration and collision some time back in the facility for experimental physics in somewhere in Europe. So they get you back there. So when you get to the elementary particle of nature, that is the very fine structure, constant. Okay? Then that is where you start.
That's where you start.
That's where you start. Now leadership will now start when two elementary particles of nature actually move to form a complexity. Do you get the point? So, but when they are still standing on their own, they're independent. See, when they now begin to go and move and form, join together to form a compound or something.
And that's when
the complexity starts. That's when leadership starts.
Thank you. So
that is where you are going to. So that's where the nature is, that the natural law that governs leadership starts.
Yeah. And I love what you're saying, because I'm not a quantum physicist, but I can completely relate. Okay. So as an actuary, I don't know, are there any mathematicians in the room? Or no? Really?
There's one.
Thanks. I was just starting to think I could say anything and I wouldn't be challenged. But from what I remember, and it was a long time ago, so forgive me if I get it wrong, but I remember when we studied mathematics, a part of the curriculum of the, my degree in actuarial science was to study maths. And part of the curriculum was understanding axioms. Right? And what are axioms? Does anyone know?
Natural laws.
The axiom is that, when you did proofs in maths and you had to prove something to be correct and you had to draw some conclusions and prove some theories and theorems and whatever, you start with an axiom. And an axiom is not something that you can really prove, but it's something that forms the basis of any argument that you are going to make as a result of it. Am I correct? Yeah. So I think it relates to what you were saying in terms of the quantum physics, which is that original particle that in itself is the beginning and the start. Okay? So now I'm going to take that leap into leadership and say, okay, we can't prove this, right? Remember I said the axiom, but this is just what I'm posing as a theory, is that that starting point, that axiom, that initial particle, is that leadership begins with us. And it starts from within. And we have to know that we have to look at ourselves as leaders first, before we try and do leadership out there. And I think certainly in industry and in the environment that in business, we often look at leadership as something that we do and something that we have to implement and something that needs to, what it be measured, performed, done as an external view. And we do sometimes forget, and I know that this is evolving now, but we do sometimes forget to take that internal view and hold up the mirror to ourselves and say, so who are we as leaders?
I would like to comment on that. So what I see, especially from the West, and the Americans have published this extensively, leadership is almost a normative behavior. We can now, we define leadership in terms of what we as the collective decide is a good leader. So now we get all kind of axioms, like the servant leader, as an example. Well, you almost refer to the notion of being unique. But if we start training people to become leaders, I'm almost killing what you are. And I'm saying, well, to be a servant leader, you have to have these characteristics. So the training of the leader becomes B and B and B and B. Well, that's maybe not me, but I'll become a leader. And it's my comment that I'm not sure that there's almost a paradox. If we start leadership about me, but we ultimately see that leadership is characterized, well, there is no me in that character. That's a frame that has created a normative concept.
So I'd like to challenge what you're saying, because I wouldn't see servant leadership as an axiom at all.
But it's a norm.
It's a framework.
It's a framework.
It's one framework.
Well, but you've couched people. You said that he's a servant leader. He's a true servant leader. What constitutes him? 3 or 5 things. Well, that's great. You're a true servant leader, but are you necessarily a leader? I'm not sure.
Okay.
Because I can't see him.
I agree with him.
Yeah.
Because I don't believe, going back to quantum physics, I mean, you look at, let's take history itself. And if you look at great leaders, okay, Abraham Lincoln, I don't have to go back and tell you how many failures he had before he became president. He was not born a national leader. And if you look at our ex-president in this country, Mandela, he was not born with those genes to say he's a leader. He developed himself. So I challenge your thought in the sense that to be a true leader today, you need to be an adaptive leader. You adapt to the situation to lead.
I love it because, and again, what I'm seeing is if we go back to the core, the axiom is understanding yourself.
Yep.
So starting within, know who you are as a human being and as a leader, and then branch out, what framework do I want? Do I want adaptive leadership? Do I want servant leadership? Do I want collaborative leadership? Do I want whatever the dictatorial leadership? A dictator is also a leader. Those are the frameworks that emerge from leadership. Those are the frameworks that are sitting out here that we try to say, well, you need to be like this, or you need to be like this, or you need to be like that.
Please, before
But
you
actually, yes.
You said, that's one thing, I'm actually struggling with this thing. You know, people say, know who you are. And a lot of people, you hear a lot of people beat their chest and say, this is who I am. But they have aspirations, okay? And when you are aspiring, you are in a meta state. You know what I mean by meta state? In a state of indefiniteness.
Evolved.
Yeah, you are this, but you are moving to that. So when you are moving to that, what are you?
Yeah.
You are no more what you are.
Can you not be both?
So at that point in time, you cannot say, this is who I am. Okay, not that you cannot. Okay, not that you cannot, but you see, you know, scientifically, okay, a state in a state of phase transition, which is basically what we are doing all the time.
Yeah.
You know, when you left matric, when you got matric, yeah, you're a matric holder. You enter into a university to get a bachelor's degree. The process you are going through to get a bachelor's degree, you don't have a bachelor's degree, but you are going beyond matric. So you are something that is called a student, but a student is not a definite identity. It is a transitional identity, right? So when you go to a bachelor's degree, you begin to transit again to become a master's degree holder. From a master's degree to get a PhD, from there you want to become a professor. It's a constant transition. When you are in a state of constant transition, do you really have a definite, you know, there is no steady universe. The steady universe is not there. The physicists and mathematicians came and discarded it sometime in 1960s, that there is no steady, we don't have a steady universe. And if we do not have a steady universe, we don't have a steady identity. You know, if you don't have a steady identity, because steady identity will be contrary to a dynamic universe. That is the logic, okay? A steady identity is contrary to a dynamic universe. What we have is a dynamic and expanding universe. And they found something they call the gravitational ripple, you know, which actually was said to have been launched into the universe the day the Big Bang happened. They say it was some trillion years back. Okay, so if that is what is governing every other thing, that is responsible for expansion, inflation, and the fact that the universe is continuing. Okay, if that is there, and it is true that it is there, physicists and mathematicians have agreed that it is there. Okay, and in fact, they used the telescope sometime few years ago in Antarctica to actually discover that thing. They call it the gravitational ripple. And the guy who did it, they gave him, somebody proposed it in the thesis sometime back. They shut it down, but eventually they found it. Just like the Higgs boson, that was shut down sometime back, and eventually they gave the guy who found it, gave him a red mark when they discovered it. So the point is this, my thinking is that if we have an expanding and a transitional universe, then we do not have a constant personality. Because we are growing, right? We are aspiring, right? And we are becoming. Actually, that is the being and the becoming.
But let's hear where you're taking this.
But doesn't that speak to your earlier point? There's no sort of one leadership style. You gotta adapt. It's about you as a leader transforming to the environment around you.
You need to be adaptable.
Exactly. So I just want to say to that, I want to hear all the comments, but I do want to add my own comment. And that is that, for me, self-awareness and starting within is seeing the being and seeing the becoming and holding that at the same time, and I think you can. It's not just when we evolve we lose who we are, because that's the danger. The key is to hold the two. Who am I and who am I becoming at the same time? Because of course it's a journey and it doesn't ever stop. But I know Mario wanted to say something and we'll go around.
Just a quick one. In terms of leadership, I think, like all things, is a continuum. So to actually say what is a leader is actually meaningless, because you get the one who's got very limited leadership and the one that's got much greater level of leadership. Secondly, the only thing that ever made sense to me is situational leadership, because in fact we need to be all of those depending on the circumstances.
Exactly. Thank you.
Yeah, so your field of study is it based on qualitative or quantitative?
You don't need to go there. You don't need to go there.
Can I say that I haven't started my PhD yet?
Was it case
You
study?
you take the word lead, it's learn, evolve, adapt, and deploy. That's in a nutshell. That's the issue.
Thank you. Yeah, we've got a discussion.
Just on your topic of wholehearted leadership.
Yeah, you're not letting me get there, but okay.
Okay, then we leave it to get there.
No, go for it. Let's hear.
Now let's take this way.
Yeah.
I'm talking about wholehearted. My thing would be, when you're in a leadership role, you can't do things half-hearted. It's like your heart has 4 chambers. If one of those chambers doesn't function, then you're going to have a problem, isn't it? You'll end up in ICU or something like that. So being a leader, there's probably certain attributes in those chambers. The analogy of a heart is a chamber that need to be there for you to function properly. So that be the wholehearted concept, not half-hearted.
So if we move to the wholehearted concept, what it is about having an integrated approach that looks not only at what we're doing, and really what I love about the conversation, and really speaks to exactly what I'm saying, is that leadership is way too complex to come up with one definition. We're never going to do that. One style, one best way, one way to be, one thing to develop. We're not going to do that. We've got to find a way of making room for all the different kinds of leaderships in different situations, for different people, for different personalities, for different evolutions of personality. But what do I see as a wholehearted leadership approach is one that takes into account the doing, which to me is the obvious one, because this is how we get measured, this is how we see the results of what it is that we do in terms of our leadership. Then there's the being, which is the who we are. So really looking at ourselves and understanding who we are, being able to be self-aware in terms of what are the things that make up the personality, the drivers, the values, whatever it is that makes up me, and I can see you want to say a whole lot. And then you've got the relating. Because as leaders, we're not on an island, we're not alone. We've got to be able to relate to the people around us, the community that we serve and are a part of. Leaders can sometimes be a part of the community or outside of the community, but we're always working with people. And it's really understanding the nature of building relationships and interacting with people and really doing what we do through people. So the way that I've got it is as a Venn diagram with those 3 aspects, the being, the doing, and the relating, and then a circle that encompasses all of those, which is the meaning, which is the why. Why do we do what we do? Why do we get up in the morning? Why is it important to us? What is the purpose in that? And if I look broader than that, so coming out of this model will always sit within a system, within a context. So it can be a business context, or it can be a family context, or it can be a community context. It doesn't really matter. It can be within yourself, your own kind of space, your own head as well, if you think of it that way. And that's my wholehearted leadership. And I don't believe, just like you say, when one chamber is not working, it's going to affect the whole system. And if one of those doesn't exist, or we don't pay attention to it, that whole framework is a wholehearted framework. If we don't pay attention to one aspect, we're not going to have an integrated, holistic approach to leadership.
So what you're saying is that you need those elements, those core elements, like say the 4 chambers of your model.
Yeah.
You need it irrespective of which leadership style you're going to be adapting.
Irrespective of leadership style, irrespective of context.
And then you will adapt those elements according to the situation or whatever's needed at the time. Like for example, if you don't have integrity, if you're not seen as an ethical person, then if someone was seen in one of those elements, it means that you're not a good leader. You feel it's not a leader because you've got no integrity. You've been involved in fraud and a whole lot of stuff. So how can you be, you know, a person in leadership role?
You're cutting out a lot of CEO in the list of the JSC. By definition.
And I just want to add, and then I want to open it up to discussion. You can knock it and say whatever it is wrong, which I'm sure you will. But what I want to say is that the way that I use this framework, which is also a little bit different, is really by saying it's not, so let's look at being. What are the things of being that need to be there so that we can, you know, get that area taken care of? It's actually not about that. It's about asking the questions. So if you're going to use a framework like that, ask questions. Be prepared to challenge anything. Be prepared to challenge the obvious, the sun rising, or whatever it is that's the obvious of that particular area. And just ask questions around being. Who am I? What am I aware of? What's going on for me right now? Am I on this journey of being and becoming? And where exactly am I on this journey? What does it feel like? And what does it mean for me? So ask questions. It's not about giving answers. It's about being curious and about being prepared to be wrong as well, which you guys know about. I mean, you put yourself in this kind of forum to be challenged and to be told where you're wrong and to be asked those questions. And that's absolutely beautiful because that's what we need to be doing as leaders. Let's hear some thoughts on that.
Okay, so
Yeah?
yeah, I'm going to just throw a curveball again.
Go for it, of course.
Obviously, the 4 quadrants that you mentioned, you're considering Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
No.
Because that
No.
is a critical point in anyone's leadership space.
Are you saying
This
Maslow's
is-
hierarchy of needs?
Is that a truth?
Yeah.
Because if you just worried about basic shelter and survival, you're definitely not going to get a good leader to work on self-esteem. So your situation will determine the type of leader that you can become at that point in time.
So how are you relating that to Maslow's hierarchy of needs? What, are you
Each
saying
person-
that's an
yeah.
absolute truth?
I said I'm throwing a curve. Okay.
No, I want to hear.
And the reason I'm saying that is, as gentleman mentioned, you said the 4 quadrants need to work together,
Yes.
understandably. But the situation will be different for different people at that specific point in time.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Now, the reason I say that, based on the hierarchy of
Yeah.
needs, I can be a leader in category 1, whereas he can be a leader in category 4.
What category? The
I'm just saying
hierarchy.
yes.
So can I just say something? Because for me, Maslow's hierarchy of needs is an interesting one, and I actually wrote an article on it. And for me, there's a hierarchy to that, which I don't believe in. So what I did is, I actually turned the triangle upside
Share your
down.
thoughts with us.
Do you want to hear? So my thoughts come from the space of, has anybody been exposed to Viktor Frankl's work?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So Viktor Frankl was a survivor of World War II, the Holocaust. He went through those concentration camps, the death camps, really horrible torture, really where every human being was stripped of their humanness. And he came out of it, absolutely, he wrote Man's Search for Meaning. If anybody hasn't read that book, I really would recommend it. He came out of it with an absolute motivation to make a change in the world and to contribute to the world. And he came out of the field of logotherapy, which was derived from his experience in the concentration camps. Now, what he found is that everything was stripped away. So if you look at the hierarchy, food and water, security, love and connection, what's the 4th one? Self-esteem, and then self-actualization. All of those were absolutely stripped away from the people in the concentration camps. Yet, if they were able to find a sense of meaning in their experience, they were able to survive it. And he tells the story of one of the prisoners who had a dream that they were going to be released, that the war would end and they would be released on a certain date. I don't remember what it was. Say it was the 10th of February. And that gave everybody the strength to continue and to fight on and really get to that 10th of February. And then what happened? The 10th of February came and the war didn't end, and it was exactly the same. And a whole lot of people died on that day because they lost their sense of meaning. They didn't have that anymore. They didn't have anything to hold on to. And what he showed is actually, so my connection to that is that you can take away everything. And everything was taken away. Those basics in the pyramid did not exist for those people. Yet their sense of meaning and their sense of self-actualization helped them to get through. What's it? And for him, personally, what it was the belief that he would do something with this experience. And he self-actualized, so he had that sense of meaning as a starting point. So I say turn the triangle upside down.
Interesting in that.
Yeah.
But if one takes an example of Nelson Mandela, I mean, he was incarcerated for many years, and yet he was a leader in prison.
Exactly.
He was leading people in all parts of the world. I mean, that was sort of leadership. When he speaks to the chamber stuff, he had integrity. People respected him because he said, you know, I'm prepared to die for whatever I'm prepared to die for. That in itself made people look up to him. And so I always said to people, you know, the apartheid government locked him up. They made him the leader. They actually made him a leader, unconsciously by locking him up. Because if they had kept him in the country as just someone who went into exile or stuff, he wouldn't have been that powerful. The fact that they put him there, and he stood for values and stuff, in that core model of yours, people started respecting him. And he just basically became a leader.
Leadership implies followers.
Does it? Does it?
No.
Why not?
I think I like your point right in the beginning. I think I'm looking from a martial arts perspective. I think that's one point. In that moment, the locus of control's got to be within you, because there can be a lot of influencing factors around you. I disagree in some, because I think that if I encounter a lot of people, to me leadership, a lot of people are effective personal leaders to the extent that they crystallize their thinking as to where they are. And they use whatever the resources are to respond to things. They don't necessarily have to have a follower. But I like what you were saying in terms of, I think that wholeheartedness in that moment of being in martial arts, for example, that person is really in control, wholeheartedly. I think that's what integral means to me.
But James, let's understand what you mean.
It doesn't have to be physical followers, it's just that you believe in yourself that what you're doing is on the forefront, whether people choose to follow you physically in numbers or not. It's not really that important.
So then you
influence people to have a movement.
Correct.
So
just say that again, sir.
This is for me a theory I believe very strongly in. And if we take it to the corporate environment or in any other organization, you need very good followership for leadership to happen. These are the two sides of the same coin. If they are not balanced, you will never go anywhere. So if I use a shift or a movement as a determination of whether I'm actually a leader with impact, I'm going to look at it. If I've said something, and there's a certain group of people, they may not necessarily be followers in the context of being subordinates, but as I make a statement, and Madiba was known for that. Walked in and sometimes say nothing, but just the gestures make people move in a certain direction. They're not necessarily his followers, but he's taken a leadership movement in the form of a body language, and the response was followed, and action actually. So, and again, it's just something that we can debate about, because for me, the only time I get very interested in the science of leadership is when it works for me, but when it doesn't work for me. And I said, okay, now what did I do wrong? Or what did I do wrong? So leadership is about impact. And then we can go to actually structural leadership. We have to have support needs. And we are going to be the one who shall this structure.
But I would want to ask something. I wanted to think of architecture, and even in the arts. We can take Kandinsky as an example, or let's take architecture. Frank Lloyd Wright started the first skyscrapers in Chicago with Sullivan. He was not acknowledged as a leader in his domain by his peers. They actually rejected him. Well, today, skyscrapers are all over the world. But in 1912, 1911, when they constructed the idea of building a skyscraper, it was totally rejected. Chicago just said, this is not possible. Now, how do we interpret that? That sometimes the uniqueness of an individual can emerge, but the people are not ready for that uniqueness. Now, what does that talk to leadership? So Frank Lloyd Wright died in '59. Today he's hailed as an icon in architecture. But for almost the first 30 years of his life as a leader in his domain, he was rejected.
Can I respond to that?
Yep.
I think that's a beautiful example of that tension between the external aspect of leadership and the internal aspect of leadership. Because he only got the external recognition many years later.
Well,
And
after he
that's
died
what-
almost.
Yeah, or after he died. So that is what we are almost trained to look for in order to confirm our own leadership, is that external validation or recognition, that external impact. Yet he believed enough in what he was doing and in himself that I would say that he was a leader from that moment, because he went with conviction. He had a sense of purpose around it. He knew from his soul that he needed to do it, and he then did it. And he didn't get the recognition, but he had impact, without a doubt, even at the time that he wasn't recognized.
But he had no followers.
I don't believe leadership implies followership.
No, it doesn't have to be physical follows at that point in time. It can come later because you're breaking new
So a
territory,
person
you're
who's
creating new ground.
insignificant, who you don't know and you will never hear about, is he or she not a leader?
Correct.
But we can argue about this.
You can.
If you hire me to lead an organization and people just choose not to follow me, or I fail to influence people to follow the direction I give, I have failed in leadership.
You have not. You may not have failed in leadership. Maybe you have failed in leading the organization,
Managing
which
the
is
organization.
one context. But have you failed in leadership? And my question there would be to say, how are you leading yourself? What is going on that you have a certain position?
I think it's both. It's not either. I mean, I have to lead myself to be able to lead other people. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But I need to be able to make a shift. People need to,
Yeah.
there are people that in my language say they are really in the front. They're not necessarily leading. Because people are not following them. They're not influencing people.
But Sam, there's a paradox in making a shift and having followers, because people are not prone to accept change. So when the landscape changes, they struggle to follow. Now, if you do a shift, the landscape changes. The landscape is redirected. So there's a potential paradox there. I buy into your idea that leadership must bring a change or a shift, but that does not necessarily mean on that time there will be followers. Maybe in your long term, over a period, there could be followers, but it may not be there.
Not the same.
Yeah.
And the question is, if you bring about a shift within yourself, does that not mean leadership?
Well, in my mind, yes. I'm just arguing it against
Yeah.
the notion of fellowship.
Okay.
What about the sense of like a trade union? I mean, you need followers to be successful, but you don't have it. I'm just looking from that angle. I understand your point about the architecture.
You need paid subscribers.
So,
Well, you see,
Otherwise, it doesn't exist.
Yeah, so it's,
Naresh, in my
that
mind,
angle.
that's where in my own mind, where the difference between management and leadership comes. I think very often in the workplace, people are very effectively managed, even rudely so, and then we, I think, misinterpret as leadership. Well, they're orchestrated like that. I mean, I can tell you, if you go to the labor union movements in South Africa, well, that's great. There's a labor union leader, a leader, who lives in a mansion on a coastal town where I reside, go to. It's a mansion. But I'm not sure that his followers knows about that mansion. Because he makes people believe that he lives a very simple life. But he's managing them in such a way that they believe in him.
valid point.
I'm not sure he's a leader.
Valid point. Good manager, poor leader.
I think.
And I think, it's interesting that we keep on bringing it back to the business context. Because that's how, again, I just think that we're wired to think about leadership in the business context. And we keep on wanting to make it make sense in the business arena, because that's what we know and that's where we face our leaders. And I'm wanting to just make it broader.
There's a reason we've been conditioned like that.
Exactly.
And I'll tell you why. Success means it's financial success. Because you can be a great leader, make money, companies close. And it's sad because that's the reality. And it started, let's say, in the third world countries, but it's now extended to the whole world. So, the best actuaries, the best chartered accountants, and the PEAC economy still remains a PEAC economies with the bailouts from UK and Germany. So, all the best minds in the world cannot resolve every single problem. So there are times where we have to, as you said, accept failure, because it's going to happen. And I like the point that you said, you can't see everything. So that's why you must sit here. So at that point,
that is a good point.
So the holistic,
I just want to say, did you experience that she became comfortable that she can't see behind her?
So the
I missed it, did you know that? Sorry, sir.
Yeah, the idea of the holistic leadership, that's how you started, right?
Wholehearted.
Wholehearted, yeah, wholehearted.
Comes from the heart.
Yeah, the wholehearted leadership. I believe that you have, I thought you probably would make a distinction between wholehearted leadership and something that is not wholehearted leadership. So
Unwholehearted.
yeah, on wholehearted, on wholesome leadership, or half-hearted leadership or something like that. Is there anybody who is doing a half-hearted leadership or another doing wholehearted leadership? Anybody who is doing, you see,
I think they are great examples.
Yeah.
I mean, if you did, was Hitler a wholehearted leader?
Hitler is a very interesting character.
Well, can I ask this? Is Robert Mugabe a wholehearted leader?
Yeah, it depends on the people he's leading.
Okay, so it depends on.
Yeah, the people he's leading. Yeah. So the point I'm actually trying to make here is this: if you get an essential distinction between these forms of leadership, then we probably think of the one that we should valorize and probably follow or something like that, the one that is more useful to contemporary mankind or contemporary developments in societies and all this stuff. But there is the other thing here is some of the issues that are raised here. There are people who are leading a multitude of people. And they have physical people following them. It's just like somebody who is standing in a pulpit making a political, addressing a rally. While he's talking, everybody is shouting and hailing him. He's leading them at that point in time, whether he's talking rubbish or not.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is.
But he may not wholeheartedly.
Yes, and he may not be wholeheartedly.
He's confusing them.
Yes, but this architect you mentioned now, Prof, is a person who is leading from an intellectual perspective. He came up with a particular kind of an intellectual construct that was not recognized at that point in time. But at the point, that thinking going to lead the manner of construction in the city, the development of the city. I was in a place one day and I was trying to tell somebody something. He said, "Who are you to tell me? Who are you to tell these people? Who are you? Who are you to tell what to do? People what to do?" I told him, "But see, there are people who are nobody who are actually telling you what to do. That you are doing it now." He said, "Who are you? Who are those people?" I said, "See, the person who built the house you are living told you where to live. The person who built the road that you are driving on every day actually told you how to move. The person who built the car you are driving actually told you how to move. So people are telling you what to do, even if you don't recognize them. And that's the point. So that's the point. You don't need the physical leaders like Nelson Mandela, Mugabe, Hitler. These are the people who they are populists. They are on the pulpit. Talking. The leaders, there are much more. The greatest leaders. Those who condition us.
Yeah, and I do want to add the greatest leaders are greatest leaders within a certain context as well.
Yeah.
So let's not make the mistake of taking someone who did something absolutely unbelievable and make them wholehearted leaders or great leaders in every area of their lives, because you will definitely find flaws in everyone. And that's what we've got to understand, that it's very much context-based. So in what context? So in some ways you might be wholehearted, and in some ways maybe not paying attention to certain areas. And I think that that's where the situational stuff comes in as well. So what is the context?
If you look at what's his name, Job from Apple.
Steve Jobs, yeah.
It's in his book.
Good example. And can I just add to your meaning question, because that actually raises an interesting one. Was Hitler a wholehearted leader, Mugabe? And actually, what I thought about only while after you had said that was that it's part of that meaning question. So does the meaning relate to some self-serving purpose? And I suppose that will start a whole other conversation, but does that relate to a self-serving purpose, or does it relate to a purpose that facilitates or contributes to the system?
Well, he had,
And that's something.
Hitler had a purpose, which...
No, he created, I mean,
Sorry, I mean, he had a purpose, and he actually worked it in such a way that
What was
he
his
gained
purpose?
control.
What was his purpose?
He was trying to create the Aryan
For
race.
what purpose?
And
To control society,
For what purpose?
to be powerful.
Exactly, for himself. At the end of it, his ultimate purpose was self-serving.
Yeah.
Whereas someone like Nelson Mandela, what was his ultimate purpose?
I think that's
There's
right.
no
Yeah,
purpose.
Forget about the fact
Initially-
Hitler did something bad, which is he killed, he
Millions of
exterminated millions of Jews and some other people. But he raised the Germans.
What he did?
He raised the Germans. By the time Hitler came, Germans were on the floor. The Americans were just, everybody was, he raised those guys up.
As an unintended consequence.
Yes,
Yeah.
he raised them up.
Okay, let's
So
take a
he's
last
punished
comment.
for his sin, but he raised the Germans.
Any last comment? We must conclude. Bernard?
I just like your whole approach to wholehearted leadership. I think that in the experience of working with a lot of black women CEOs, I think is a big lesson there for us. If you go back to the roots, a lot of that, Simone de Beauvoir was a wholehearted person, probably the person that initiated feminism. Unrecognized at a time, but a very radical person that had a lot of constraints. But if you look how that's filtered through, and I think a lesson for us, to listen to the resonance of what's happening in Africa, particularly women. There's an interesting magazine, a publication by Ernst & Young called Women in Leadership. Have a look at it.
Okay, thank you. I will. Thanks.
All right, with that interesting debate, and I love the way you allowed yourself into this.
Thank you. I loved it, guys. Thanks. Can I come again? I didn't come to have my whole model smashed to pieces, but it was fun. It was a
So
lot
thanks
of
for
fun.
joining us, and I hope we
Thank
see you
you.
again,
Thank you.
and please talk afterwards to the colleagues. This is a Da Vinci gift,
Oh, thank
but you are required to solve this problem.
Uh-oh,
You don't
no,
need to do it publicly.
Okay, cool.
But when you do it, you can send us a little WhatsApp or whatever image and show us how did you solve this.
Okay.
But this was designed by Da Vinci in 1792.
Oh, wow. Okay, thank you very much.
But you must solve it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'll take the challenge.
Shane, thank
You
you.
need to solve it wholeheartedly.
It's the only way.
Use leadership and lead.
Guys, thank you very much. There's some food
Can I
and
just, sorry, can
drinks
I
there.
mention that I do have some books and leadership
Yes.
cards on the table outside.
Well, talk
if
to us a little
anyone
bit
wants
about it if you wish to.
to. So, thank you. I wrote, so the book that I wrote, which is Courage to Lead, and I didn't get to tell you my story about Sunrise, but I'll tell you as if anyone's interested outside afterwards. Oh God, this is
You're not adaptable.
it's way too much of a connector. I wrote the book because I climbed Kilimanjaro, and that was a huge challenge for me. Huge, huge challenge. I'm not sporty or adventurous in any way. And what I was struck by was the metaphors. So your metaphor of not always being able to see the picture really speaks to me because I love metaphors and I love visuals. I was struck by the metaphors of the experiences on the mountain and what it means to be a leader. And then I came back and wrote this book because my passion is around making leadership accessible. Really, not just telling everybody that they're a leader, but actually giving them some practical tips and tools on how do we do this thing that's become this blown up topic that's so difficult and so complicated to really get a handle on. How do we actually do it if we want to make it simple and practical in everyday life, whether it's business or not business. So I wrote my book. I used stories from Kilimanjaro so that each chapter is short because I know people don't have time to read and it's really intended to open the book and read it where you want. But each chapter is short. It has a story from Kilimanjaro, a leadership lesson from there, and then a practical exercise to go and do. And then my passion is also around asking questions and really being able to deepen conversations through the type of questions we ask. And I love that we did exactly that today. And I've created a set of leadership cards that are just open-ended questions for people to be able to develop conversations, create new thinking, create fresh thinking, and be able to engage with people in a way that's, you know, more facilitative and creates ideas rather than just let me tell you how to do it, this is how it's going to be. So those are outside available for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Yeah.